Rubel, your comments on our current energy policy, it sounds like we're starting with national questions, so we'll start there. Maybe a quick comment on our current energy policies and kind of in the same vein when we just talked about the economy. Are you trusting that private companies can come in and with their time and with their resources, if you're agreeing that there should be a change, are we going to want to keep that responsibility with them, or do you feel as a U.S. Congressman that within your power you may use some of that regulatory authority to maybe try to spur change that way?
Specifically as it relates to energy?
Energy, right.
The country doesn't have an energy policy. Let's just admit it. Jimmy Carter started the Department of Energy back in the 1970s with the promise to reduce Americans' dependence on foreign oil. And then Ronald Reagan said the same thing. George Bush, #1, said the same thing. Bill Clinton said the same thing. George W. Bush said the same thing. Barack Obama said the same thing. The fact of the matter is we do not have a cohesive energy policy in this country. And until we're willing to admit the complete failure of our government to manage energy and to have a cohesive, comprehensive energy policy, we can't fix it. So, do I believe that the free marketplace can solve our energy problems? I absolutely do it, and I believe they can do it without subsidy. The fact of the matter, there are clean energy solutions and there are still carbon-based solutions. The U.S. has enough oil in its soil and on its land and offshore that we could be an oil exporter if that's what we chose to do. And we're not going anywhere near scratching the surface on what could be done with natural gas and propane. We can look at solar and wind. There are all kinds of things on a comprehensive approach, expanding nuclear. But there's never been a comprehensive energy policy. And so it's time for Congress, and it's time for new representation in Congress to actually solve that problem. And it's one of those things I talk about on my website at rebelforcongress.com. If you'd like to see some practical solutions for this country's energy problem, I would encourage you to go there and get more information. Thank you.
I apologize. I had a liberal moment. I made a mistake. 1 minute rebuttal. Do any of the other candidates have any rebuttal to Terry's comments on the unemployment bill? Anything on Reed's comments on the energy? We'll go on then to Ward with question for Roger Roth.
Mr. Roth, I'd just like you to clarify something on your site, and then I'll go into a question.
Sure.
Okay? On Mr. Roth's website, he is quoted as saying, "We must put a stop to the process of congressmen joining the lobby corps upon retiring from public office." Mr. Roth, I'm sorry, I'm switching pages.
No problem.
Mr. Roth's uncle Toby Roth is an ex-congressman and current lobbyist whose lobbying services have been utilized by local employer African papers. Do you see ex-congressmen as having an injurious effect on Congress's legislative process, a process that you, Mr. Roth, describe on your website as one where Congress imposes its will?
Well, if I understand the first part of your question, it's what's my stance on lobbyists in Washington,
yes, sir.
Former members?
Yes, sir.
I will tell you this. Right now in Washington, you can leave office, wait 365 days, and you can go and profit off of all the contacts that you made while you were in office. Serving in Congress is an honor, it's not a career. And we've got to get that message home, and the only way we can is if we prohibit anyone who served one day out in Washington in elected office from coming back and profiting off of their experience. Now, you mentioned my Uncle Toby, and I will tell you this. After 4 years of Steve Kagan, after 2 years, does anyone remember Jay Johnson back in the 90s? Yeah, my Uncle Toby was one heck of a congressman. And when he comes to Wapaka, you can ask him any questions you might have about what he does. But I'm here to tell you, we've got to get integrity back into Washington, and the only way we get integrity back into Washington is to let those individuals know they represent us. They don't represent the special interests out in Washington, which is why we need campaign finance reform. I'm proud to say that 97% of the money that I've raised comes from right here in the state of Wisconsin. It doesn't come from other states. It doesn't come from special interests. It doesn't come from Washington, D.C. So when I go out to Washington, I will be remembering the people in the state of Wisconsin, in my district here in the 8th District, who sent me out there to do a job. And it starts with listening, learning, and leading. Listen to them, learn from them, and lead. Thank you.
Okay, next, John Fichet for Marks of Art. Oh, yeah. Any rebuttal, 1 minute, for any of the other candidates to Roger's comments. Okay, John, go ahead.
Mr. Savard, many of our local dairy farmers and some manufacturers here rely on immigrant labor to keep their operations viable. How do you think the federal government should handle the millions of illegal immigrants who are currently in the U.S.?
That is one of the top 2 issues that I will be dealing with when I get there. Besides the overarching spending problem that Washington has, which is pervasive throughout all of our country and all of our economic ills, we must get our border under control. I stole a phrase from a guy I saw on TV who said, "Tall fences, wide gates." We are a nation of immigrants. We should continue that tremendous heritage, but we need to control the flow of who's coming in. Once we get that step under control, then we can begin to deal with the enormous problem of the illegal immigrants amongst us. What does the federal government not understand about the word illegal? We must get those people either documented or back in line. It's an enormous problem that nobody has an exact answer for when you're talking 12, 15, whatever the number is, million people. But I will say that priority number 1 is to get that fence built, a physical fence built tall with wide gates. Then we can begin to deal with the problem amongst us, which is getting those in our midst documented, get them U.S. citizens if they choose, but we must know who's within our borders. Thank you.
Comment? Rebuttal, 1 minute, anybody? Terry?
I just have a comment, because we're saying illegal immigration is an important issue, and we're talking around it. President Reagan proposed that we put military bases all along our border, so that illegal immigrants and individuals that would intend to do us harm would at least have a barrier of defense from the United States. I agree with that. We should take a look at that. The problem is this, and I've got to be honest. Integrity is holding a strict set of convictions and values that you uphold, tough times and bad. Republicans have been guilty politically of doing nothing about illegal immigration because they want cheap labor. Democrats have been guilty about doing nothing about illegal immigration because they want illegal votes. It's time that we stood up and we were honest about the issue if we say that we care about it. It's not that farmers or manufacturers need cheap labor. We're in a crisis for jobs. We need to produce 200,000 jobs a month if we're going to just keep up with the 2008 figures all the way up to 2014. Illegal immigration needs to have the weight of law imposed on it, and we need to honor the Constitution and stop the politics.
I'm going to start the other direction. John, for Attorney McCormick.
Mr. McCormick, the national debt clock is spinning. The national debt clock is spinning like an out-of-control time machine. How can we first stop it from spinning up so fast? And number 2, how can we ever begin to repay that debt?
In 2 minutes. It starts with auditing the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is given two completely dichotomous goals right now, and it's not accountable to anybody. It's a private corporation that's not accountable to the American citizens yet. It's supposed to keep in line unemployment figures, and it's supposed to keep in line our cost of living index, our rate of inflation. It's impossible. If we look at European countries that have a much more money stable system, then their Federal Reserves or agencies like it have one goal: 0% inflation to stabilize the money system. That's number one. Number two, you have to elect people, and I always say this, I'm running against two mindsets. Number one, favors for votes. The good old-fashioned business as usual that sticks earmarks into everything for choice associations and agencies that people represent on the side. This got to stop. We need to be able to debate independently on every piece of legislation that goes forward. I don't care how long it takes. The second mindset that I'll be fighting is that the government should do everything for you. Make every decision for you, control your life, tell you what kind of health care to get, make all choices for you. I reject both notions. Both are costing us money. Both are rifling up the federal debt because we're just mouthing the words. We're not delivering the actions. It's time for actual talk and action, not just talk. We need to cut agencies with a hatchet, not a scalpel. Look at the 1970s pay-for-play agencies that were created by Carter, the Energy Department and Education. If you're a constitutionalist, you believe education should be controlled by the states. You believe in federalism and government closest to the people. When we look at our performance as a nation in education, it is abysmal. We can do better. We have the talent if we have government closest to the people, and we actually are in our office to do our jobs, not to pretend that we're somebody. We need to all do our jobs. Thank you.